Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: how the war in Gaza revived the axis of resistance. Who are Houthis and why are they attacking ships in the Red Sea? At Davos, Blinken says pathway to Palestinian state necessity for Israel security. Asian Cup, emotion high for Palestine football team. Why the Global South supports Pretoria's ICJ genocide case. How the war in Gaza revived the axis of resistance. Foreign affairs. The axis of resistance, consisting of Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other groups, is consolidating an alliance of forces across the Middle East, challenging the regional order established by the West. The axis is motivated by a shared hatred of US and Israeli colonialism and sees itself as an alliance built around common strategic goals. The axis's members believe they are fighting the same war against Israel and the United States, and they will not be deterred by US warnings or attacks. The axis is gaining popularity and support globally, particularly through its effective use of social media to shape the narrative and gain public sympathy for the Palestinian cause. The axis's success in the media war is due to its strong and nimble media infrastructure, which has been built over the past decade. The axis puts out daily videos of battlefield operations, posts on social media platforms like TikTok, and produces memes and content celebrating key figures within the alliance. The Axis hopes that this media campaign will generate sufficient public pressure to force the United States to retreat from the Middle East and respect Palestinian sovereignty. The Axis's military and soft power campaigns present unprecedented challenges for the West, particularly for the United States. If the conflict in Gaza continues and no clear path to a just settlement for the Palestinians is established, the Axis will continue to gain influence and shape regional politics. The only way to undermine the Axis's influence is to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza and work towards a real and just settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian issue. If this is not done, the Axis will remain a regional reality that the United States will have to contend with for years to come. Who are Houthis and why are they attacking ships in the Red Sea? The Independent. Tensions in the Middle East have escalated as Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have begun attacking ships in the Red Sea, a key international trade route. The group claims that it is targeting the ships in order to end Israel's offensive against Hamas. In retaliation, the UK and US have launched airstrikes against the rebels. The Houthi rebels are part of Iran's axis of resistance and are armed, sponsored, and trained by Iran. The conflict in Yemen, which began in 2014 and has killed almost 400,000 people, is viewed as a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. At Davos, Blinken says pathway to Palestinian state necessity for Israel security. South China Morning Post. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told the World Economic Forum that there needs to be a pathway to a Palestinian state. Blinken said that if Israel were to be brought into the fold in the Middle East, the region could isolate Iran, which he called the biggest concern in terms of security, as well as its proxies, which include Yemen's Houthi rebels who have been attacking commercial ships in the Red Sea. Asian Cup, emotion high for Palestine football team. Deutsche Welle. The coach of the Palestine men's national football team, Makram Daboub, has admitted that it has been difficult to control his players' emotions during the Asian Cup, as it coincides with the 100th day of the Israel-Hamas war. The team's first game was against Iran and was greeted with a huge roar from the stands when they scored their first goal. The Palestinian football team has never won an Asian Cup match, but still have hope in their final group game against Hong Kong. The players are aware that their sport may be seen as a distraction, but it still holds real meaning for them. Why the Global South supports Pretoria's ICJ genocide case. Foreign policy. Namibia has issued a statement supporting South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, ICJ. Namibian President Hage Geingob criticized Germany, which has defended Israel, for its inability to draw lessons from its horrific history. Namibia's statement also condemned the carnage waged against Palestinians in Gaza. The Namibian and Herero peoples suffered a genocide between 1904 and 1908 under German colonial rule. Medicine for hostages, civilians bound for Gaza after night of deadly strikes. South China Morning Post. Medicines and humanitarian aid are expected to be delivered to Gaza on Wednesday as part of a deal brokered by Qatar and France. The deal will see medication delivered to Israeli hostages in exchange for aid for civilians in Gaza. The fate of the hostages has gripped Israeli society, while the humanitarian crisis in Gaza has led to international calls for a ceasefire. The war in Gaza began with an attack by Hamas in October and has resulted in around 1,140 deaths in Israel and at least 24,285 in Gaza. Approximately 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced. What Hezbollah's fortifications teach us about North Korean defenses. Diplomat. The underground tunnel and bunker network built by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has strong similarities to the network of tunnels and underground fortifications in North Korea. Hezbollah's ability to effectively counter Israeli forces during the 2006 conflict was largely due to its extensive underground infrastructure. North Korea has been involved in the development of Hezbollah's underground network since the 1980s, providing expertise in tunneling and fortifications. The tunnels in Lebanon have been used to store weapons, provide security for missile launchers, and serve as staging centers for military operations. The underground fortifications have made it difficult for Israel to launch a successful full-scale assault on southern Lebanon, as demonstrated by a secret assessment by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. North Korea's expertise in tunneling and underground fortifications originates from the Korean War, when key military and industrial sites were built deep underground to prepare for a possible air assault. Iran's Fordow uranium enrichment plant is thought to have been built with extensive North Korean assistance. The underground fortifications in North Korea have made it challenging to locate and damage key weapons and facilities. The importance of North Korea's underground fortifications has been recognized by the Pentagon, which has concluded that nothing short of a full-scale ground invasion could disarm North Korea. The underground tunnel and bunker network in southern Lebanon has been a game-changer for Hezbollah's military capabilities and has posed significant challenges for the Israel Defense Forces. It also highlights the magnitude of the challenges that the much larger underground network in North Korea would pose in the event of a war on the Korean peninsula. Iran attacks jihadist group in Pakistan. Financial Times. Iran has launched missile and drone strikes on 2 bases of the Sunni jihadist group Jaish al-Adl in Pakistan. The attack follows similar operations in Iraq and Syria by Iran's Revolutionary Guards in response to a suicide bombing in Kerman this month. Pakistan has condemned the strikes and warned of potential serious consequences, whilst China's foreign ministry has urged both countries to exercise restraint. Qatar, France strike deal to supply medicine to Israeli hostages, Gazans. Washington Post. A plan mediated by Qatar and France to deliver life-saving medication to Israeli hostages, as well as much-needed aid to civilians in Gaza, went into motion Wednesday in a rare diplomatic breakthrough. Live updates: Israel says it killed a Palestinian leader during West Bank airstrike. Yahoo! The Israeli army has announced that it killed a senior Palestinian militant, Ahmed Abdullah Abu Shalal, in an airstrike in the West Bank. Shalal was said to be responsible for infrastructure and had planned multiple attacks against Israelis in Jerusalem. The Israeli military said that Shalal and his cell had received funding and guidance from Iranian sources. Violence has escalated in the Israeli-occupied West Bank since the start of the war in Gaza, with over 350 Palestinians killed in the last 3 months, mainly during Israeli arrest raids and violent protests. Israel has increasingly used airstrikes in the West Bank as the fighting has intensified, though targeted killings are still relatively rare in the territory. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we will be diving into the latest news from the Middle East, where the war in Gaza has revived the axis of resistance. This alliance, consisting of Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other groups, is challenging the regional order established by the West. They share a common hatred for U.S. and Israeli colonialism and see themselves as fighting the same war against Israel and the United States. One of the key reasons for the Axis's success is their strong and nimble media infrastructure. They have effectively used social media platforms like TikTok to shape the narrative and gain public sympathy for the Palestinian cause. This media campaign has put pressure on the United States to retreat from the Middle East and respect Palestinian sovereignty. If a just settlement for the Palestinians is not reached, the Axis will continue to gain influence and shape regional politics. In other news, tensions in the Middle East have escalated as Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have started attacking ships in the Red Sea. This is part of their efforts to end Israel's offensive against Hamas. The conflict in Yemen, where the Houthis are based, is viewed as a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has emphasized the need for a pathway to a Palestinian state, stating that it is necessary for Israel's security. He believes that by bringing Israel into the fold in the Middle East, the region can isolate Iran and its proxies, including the Houthi rebels. On a lighter note, the Palestinian football team is participating in the Asian Cup, coinciding with the 100th day of the Israel-Hamas war. The coach admits that it has been difficult to control the players' emotions, but they still hold hope for their final group game against Hong Kong. In a surprising turn of events, Namibia has expressed support for South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Namibia's statement also condemned the carnage waged against Palestinians in Gaza, drawing parallels to the genocide suffered by the Namibian and Herero peoples under German colonial rule. In terms of humanitarian aid, medicines and aid are expected to be delivered to Gaza as part of a deal brokered by Qatar and France. This deal includes delivering medication to Israeli hostages in exchange for aid for civilians in Gaza. The fate of the hostages has gripped Israeli society, while the humanitarian crisis in Gaza has led to international calls for a ceasefire. Moving on to military matters, Hezbollah's underground tunnel and bunker network in southern Lebanon has similarities to North Korea's defenses. North Korea has been involved in the development of Hezbollah's underground infrastructure since the 1980s, providing expertise in tunneling and fortifications. The importance of these underground fortifications has been recognized by the Pentagon, which believes that only a full-scale ground invasion could disarm North Korea. Lastly, Iran has launched missile and drone strikes on bases of the Sunni jihadist group Jaish al-Adl in Pakistan. This comes as a response to a suicide bombing in Iran. The situation has led to tensions between Iran and Pakistan, with China urging restraint. So, my dear viewers, the war in Gaza has not only revived the axis of resistance but has also brought forth a series of complex and interconnected events in the Middle East. The influence of this alliance, the challenges they pose, and the potential outcomes all deserve our attention. What are your thoughts on these developments? Do you see a way out of this conflict? I welcome your questions and insights. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.